Have you ever wondered what it would look like to control every player on your GameCube at the same time? Did you ever think to yourself as a kid, man, I wish I had 8 hands just to see what that would look like, because using every appendage is just too unreliable and you can't quite press the L button with your right toe. Now the chaos no one asked for. Simultaneous multiplayer input. Yes, my friends, the ability to control everyone and each other at the same time. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? The absolute inability to do simple tasks while everyone around you thwarts your every move. It's really quite fun. To show you how it's done, for this tutorial I will only be using GameCube controllers. To use various controllers, take note of what each controller and input is called, because each brand of controllers names their controllers and inputs differently. For example, an Xbox One controller is named X input and its A button is called button A. With the 𝙎𝙧 adapter and GameCube controller, the controller is called D input and its A button is called button 1. To get started, go into the Dolphin controller settings and map all the controls properly. Pro tip: hold the trigger until just before pushing all the way down, then click the trigger to map it, and then push down all the way to properly map the digital controls within the shoulder buttons. Afterwards, right-click an input. A dialog will appear, and in the drop-down menu, it should already say the name of the controller being used. If you lose track as to which controller you're using, and trust me, it's easier than it sounds the way 𝙎𝙧 labels their adapter, you can check the controller config, which will say which device is currently being used. Also on this dialog, in the bottom box, it should say something like button 1 and nothing else. Now go into the drop-down menu and select the next controller you want to use, then click the desired input. Now, it's crucial to click in the box after the already listed input. Otherwise, you'll get an error when trying to continue because it tries copying a control that doesn't exist. Sort of like telling someone to do something for you without ever telling them what it is you want. And for some reason, there's no cancel or undo options here, so you're forced to clear all controls completely. If you remembered the input, you can click the input, press select, then apply for safe measure. You can also press detect, which will let you press any button on the controller, including control sticks and other analog axes, and it will highlight which button you've just pressed. So, select the next controller, click the desired input, click after all the written text, and lastly, click the add button. If all has gone well, on the very bottom of this dialog, it will say that you have multiple controls bound. You do not have to keep clicking the end of the text portion after the first added controller. Repeat the process for as many controllers as you wish. Something incredibly important to not be confused by is that when adding multiple controls, you are telling the system that the buttons specified is to be activated when those other controls are pressed, and not that the button specified will activate the additional inputs. So if you want to press A on player 2's controller as player 1, you do not put controller 2's input on the player 1 port configuration, but rather you put player 1's input into the appropriate port number 2 configuration. Keep in mind that you cannot just make one single profile and apply it to every controller. The reason for this being that even though you are controlling everyone at the same time, the time it takes for the physical controller, the device listed under each pad, being used to activate the commands does take less time for the input to be registered for that controller. And there is extremely minor but real input lag, if you will, between that and inputs registering for the other controllers tethered to that primary one. This tiny and really unnoticeable delay is actually beneficial for those playing competitively and want to do their best to stay in the lead. Not to mention, profiles get saved to specific devices anyway. Rendering even the option of saving profiles 75% redundant in my opinion. For extreme chaos, consider binding controls that do opposite functions. Or even arbitrary options. A to L, C-stick to Z, B to D-pad. The possibilities are endless, especially when you combine different controls to different players. I'm sure you crazy kids can think of wonderfully horrendous combinations. Have fun. Or not.